Hi everyone, Queeveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are going to continue looking at the year ahead. We will cover one or two things that are happening in January, things that I mentioned in the last video, but we are also going to look ahead to see some of the interesting things that are coming up later in 2025. So first off, here we are on the 10th of January. This is the date of Venus's greatest elongation. So even though from this date forward, it does look like Venus is continuing to move in the wrong direction. Really, it's just that Saturn's motion around the sun and our motion around the sun, it's making it look like Saturn's moving faster. If we take a look at Venus here, we will take a look at Venus compared to the sun, because that's what's going to make the difference here. If we take a look at Venus compared to the sun, here's the sun, there's Venus. There we go. We can see that Venus is getting closer to the sun there, and just about there, that's where Venus reaches its peak. We can see that it's hovering around its peak for a little bit. So it reaches its peak, it comes out from the sun, reaches its peak, and then loops around, coming back in towards the sun. However, Venus's motion around the sun, a lot of where we see Venus depends on Venus's position around the sun. Because Saturn is moving around the sun so slowly, a lot of where we see Saturn depends on our position around the sun. Saturn will go behind the sun mostly because we're moving until we're in a position where Saturn is behind the sun. So we can see that even though Venus looks like it's further from the sun here, really it's just an illusion. The sun is getting closer and closer to the horizon at a given time, as I'm sure you can see, because it's getting brighter. We'll go back just a little bit more. Here we are on the 16th. That's the date where Mars reaches opposition. So I mentioned Mars's opposition a couple of times, and I think if I click on Mars here, it will say, yeah, 99.9% full instead of 100% full. So I'm putting that down to the tilt, unless anything in any research I do shows up something different. I'm going to say that the reason we're not seeing Mars at 100% full is something to do with the tilt of Mars, because it is at opposition on this date. And we can pretty much see that here. Mars just coming over the horizon as the sun goes under the horizon. Of course, the sky is still bright for a little bit of time after the sun goes under the horizon. So even though the sun is under the horizon here, we can see Venus. It is the beginning of nighttime. It's still not dark enough for us to see Mars. So we're only seeing Mars appear a little bit higher in the sky when the sun is more significantly under the horizon, but Mars is still rising as the sun sets. Again, it just doesn't look that way. We're going to keep pushing forward now. We are going to push out of January and first off into February, but then we will push into March as well. I mentioned that we are going to get all of the planets that are visible to the naked eye, plus Uranus and Neptune, which is nice. We are going to get all of the planets into the sky once we are into February. There we go. And it is going to be very tricky to see. Of course, we're seeing it A from here in Ireland, B from a city. But we can see here, behind this electricity pole, there's Saturn, there's Mercury. We can see them kind of moving past each other there. So Mercury will reach its greatest elongation later than that. It actually reaches its greatest elongation in March rather than February. But we can see here that Mercury and Saturn are very close together. Mercury will sort of pass Saturn as it goes out to its greatest elongation, so we will see it at its greatest elongation. Unfortunately, we won't see it at its greatest elongation while we have these other planets in the sky. There's Saturn and Mercury. Very difficult to see, as I say, from here in Ireland, and the sky is just getting dark enough for those other planets to be visible. We will very quickly hop down to the equator. I may do this again in February, and I always assume the equator is higher up the planet than it is. I always click somewhere around North Africa or the Caribbean, when really the equator is down here, closer to the center of Africa and the top of South America. It just seems strange for someone living in the northern hemisphere. It feels like the equator is just down below us, but really it's quite far away. So here we go. Now that we are more at the equator, let's see if I can go through a couple of days here. Even this close to the equator, it is a little bit tricky. Of course, there is an inconveniently placed tree The extra light pollution from the city is going to make things a little bit tougher to see, of course. So there we go. Now it's looking a little bit more achievable. I'll change the dates, get those a little closer together maybe. There we go. So just about visible. Here we go. Saturn, Mercury, Venus, and then Jupiter, Mars, and, well, Mercury, Saturn, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Neptune will be down around here, Uranus would be up around here. So these planets are all in the sky together. They are going to be a little bit difficult to see. Apparently, no matter where you are, these things are generally easier to see at the equator, but it looks like this one is still going to be a little bit tricky even at the equator. We're going to keep pushing forward now and get into March, because that is going to bring Mercury to its greatest elongation. We're not going to have to push very far into March. Here we are. And this brings Mercury and Venus very close together in the sky here on March 8th. So from the countryside, of course, it looks beautiful. I'll bring us back into the city again, just to give the slightly more likely view. Chances are you're going to be seeing this from the city rather than from the countryside. But it's okay. Mercury, despite how faint Mercury is, it is still visible to the naked eye, and here in March, it's going to be one of the better times to see Mercury. It's going to be a little bit more achievable to see Mercury from the city. So we can see Mercury, Venus, Neptune and Saturn will be behind the sun now. Uranus would still be up over here-ish, near the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters. Then we've got Jupiter, the Moon, and Mars. They are looking very close together, so let's move through time a little bit here, just in case. I don't think we're going to get an occultation, but certainly not from here in Ireland. And no, definitely not from here in Ireland, maybe not at all, but they do get very close together there in March as well. We will move a little bit further forward in March. Here we are on the night of the full moon. We're here on the 13th at 99.9% full, very early in the morning. So here we go on the 14th. It looks like it's gone down, but the actual night of the full moon is being listed as the 14th. As usual, this may simply mean that we're not seeing it at absolutely 100% full from here in Ireland. In this case, that's not what it means. We are seeing it at 100% full here in Ireland, but only if you go out on the morning of the 14th. Of course, it will, for all practical purposes, still be a full moon on the night of the 14th, but we're seeing it early in the morning. It'll be 100% full earlier in the evening for other parts of the world. And it is also the night of a lunar eclipse. Unfortunately, not one we're going to see. So we have entered a new eclipse cycle. There are going to be solar and lunar eclipses this year, and as normal, they come pretty much in pairs. So the moon is going to pass into our shadow for people in North America on the 14th. And then a month later, roughly, the moon will come around in front of the sun and there will be a solar eclipse. Unfortunately, this solar eclipse doesn't look like it's going to be visible in Ireland either. We will go back a little bit to the new moon there on the 29th and we'll see how close together they get from here in Ireland. That is pretty close. So they do get... Oh, it looks like we're getting a little bit of a partial eclipse here. Only partial, but just a little bit. So this is only where eclipse obscuration 39.36%. So about a third, not half, not close to 50%. So yeah, we're getting a little bit more than a third of the moon covered, which really isn't that much. For anyone who's seen a total solar eclipse, there's a huge difference between 99.9% and 100%. So certainly something like this down at 30% isn't incredibly impressive. For those of you living in North America, you will be on the right continent to travel further north and get a slightly better view. It does seem like from somewhere around Greenland or Iceland is where we may get a better view, but it looks like Canada is the location where it will be up to 93%. There we go. So I guess rising at close to 93% obscured. I'll zoom in because the dark background of the ground is making it very difficult to read how obscured it is. So there we go, only 78%. It seems like more. Humans, of course, people, including myself, are very bad at guessing percentages. This is 88% obscured. and that looks right, but it is very hard to tell at first glance, especially with curves like this, what percentage something is. 99.9% feels like 100, even though it's not, even though the difference is significant. So there we go. Sunrise on the 29th, if you are in Canada, looks like that's pretty much the most of the eclipse you'll see. The number that I saw on the internet was 93%, which is great. But of course, that's only going to happen for a very specific location on Earth. So if you are lucky enough to be in the right place, you might get 93%. Now, we've only covered a small portion of the year, but I can tell you that there is more solar and lunar eclipses coming up in the future. There may even be one properly visible from Ireland, not just a tiny bit of it if you're wearing eclipse glasses. We may get to see an actual lunar eclipse, or at least a partial lunar eclipse, pretty well from here in Ireland. But that's so much later in the year, I'll have to cover it in a different video. So I hope you enjoyed this slightly closer look at a couple of the things that are coming up. Venus at its greatest elongation, Mercury at its greatest elongation, Mars at opposition, all of the planets in the sky for February, and then these upcoming eclipses. So if you did enjoy this video, please do like it. If you'd like to see more from me this year, then subscribe to this YouTube channel, and do check out my website, queebeanscontent.ie, where you can read a little bit of this information as well. Hopefully, I'll see you back here next time.